Good evening, welcome to ITV News Meridian.
Tonight's headlines in the south. Back behind bars, the man dubbed Britain's worst fly tipper is jailed again for leaving fields and car parks strewn with rubbish.
Looking up, the designer of Brighton's I360 tower tells ITV Meridian there'll be no more teething troubles.
A monumental mystery. How this man unearthed an intriguing link between the notorious Cray family and the South's famous military hospital.
And a bird's eye view, the conservationist who's taking to the skies to get up close and personal with migrating swans. Good evening to you. He was once dubbed Britain's worst fly tipper. Tonight, Marcus Bairstow is back behind bars. He was caught yet again dumping tons of other people's rubbish and leaving taxpayers with the clean-up bill.
The 41-year-old from Southampton was previously jailed for 2 years in 2011 after he left a cemetery strewn with truckloads of rubbish. This time, he was caught tipping truckloads of rubbish in fields and a pub car park. Kerry Swain was in court.
A wasteland of rubbish, scars on farmland left by the man dubbed Britain's worst fly tipper. This is the man in action, captured on CCTV dumping a lorry load of waste in a pub car park in broad daylight. Arriving in court today, Marcus Bairstow was reluctant to reveal his face, words of abuse thrown at our camera. Bairstow has 144 previous convictions for fly tipping dating back to 1993. In 2011, he was sentenced to 2 years in prison and given an antisocial behaviour order banning him from most waste activities. But in May last year, he rented this land in Eastleigh, telling the owner he wanted to sort waste there. Instead, he began running a round-the-clock operation, illegally collecting and burning rubbish. Last July, his fire got out of control and set light to trees, fencing and a neighbouring business. Today, Marcus Bairstow was back at Southampton Crown Court for sentencing. Marcus Bairstow asked to address the court, and the moment he stepped into the witness box, he broke down in tears. Sobbing, he said he was sorry. He wanted to start a new life away from bad influences, and he would never do it again. The judge said she was impressed by his remorse and sentenced him to 30 weeks in prison, saying he will serve half.
He's a habitual waste criminal who obviously treats the environment, local communities and the law with contempt, and it should send a clear message to him and to other waste criminals that we will investigate crime and bring people to court. Bairstow has been called Southampton's most prolific and shameless fly tipper. He told the court he intends to move to Yorkshire after his release and find a new line of work. Kerry Swain, ITV News.
Many ambulance drivers across Sussex fear they may no longer have jobs tonight after their employer went bust. Drivers working for Docklands Medical Service, which have depots in Worthing and Bognor, say they're owed thousands of pounds.
Co-Performer took over the contract to provide non-emergency ambulances in Sussex at the start of April, but has been plagued by operational and financial problems, as Charlotte Wilkins reports.
When Docklands ambulance staff arrived at work this morning, the doors were locked and they were faced with this note on the door. When they finally managed to get in, the office had been stripped bare. It's yet another blow for staff who are employed to provide non-emergency patient transport services across Sussex. At 2 protests in Brighton today, drivers explained how they've not been paid and now their jobs are up in the air.
My house has now been placed at risk. I've been given eviction notice. I have a partner and a young child, so at the moment it's quite difficult. I'm owed, as of today, £5,000. My job with the company is a senior ops manager, so I'm actually the face of this business next to my directors. I'm embarrassed for all of my staff.
I've had to borrow money off friends and family. They don't know when they're going to get that back. I'm having to rob Peter to pay Paul, ring up all my different companies that I owe debts to. It's just a knock-on effect.
The GMB union even handed out food parcels and hardship payments to its members today to help make ends meet. Docklands, which are subcontracted by Co-Performer, say the company owes them thousands. Co-Performer says all contractual financial obligations to the company are up to date and they've received written assurance to that effect. They were assured that all staff salaries were being paid. However, there are fresh calls today for co-performer to be stripped of their contract.
I'm demanding that the CCG withdraw the contract from co-performer. It's failed, it's been bad for patients, it's been bad for staff, and that they give it to an in-house NHS provider so the patients can have a decent service and the staff can actually be treated with the dignity, frankly, that they deserve.
A spokesperson for the lead clinical commissioning group in Sussex told us the Sussex CCGs are taking urgent action, focusing immediately on two areas: to ensure stability and continuation of safe transport service for patients and to secure the future for the affected staff. Charlotte Wilkins, ITV News, Brighton.
In other news, a sailor on HMS Daring has been killed in a car accident during a stop-off in Malta. Leading engineering technician Simon Allen, who was 30, died yesterday morning. The destroyer left Portsmouth at the beginning of September on a 9-month mission to help in the fight against the so-called Islamic State. The Navy says his next of kin have been told.
An 18-year-old man has been jailed for 16 months for sexually assaulting a woman as she walked alone in Christchurch. Vidmantas Amalis, who is from Lithuania, grabbed the woman in her 30s and pushed her into a pub car park on Barrack Road. She managed to raise the alarm to passers-by who took photos of him running away.
The designer of the South Coast's newest and tallest visitor attraction announced the I360 was back in business today, and he promised no repetition of what he called the teething troubles of the last week.
David Marks admitted the problems, which saw hundreds of people trapped in the observation tower, were unfortunate and apologised to customers whose trips had to be cancelled. With more, Andy Dickinson.
The chairman of the I360 steps into its futuristic pod after the most difficult week in its short history so far. The world's tallest vertical cable car breaking down 3 times in just 4 days, its passengers repeatedly trapped on board.
Firstly, last Thursday, we had an imbalanced load reading on our control system, which meant that it went into safety mode and applied the brakes. We then had a subsequent and completely separate issue on Sunday when the pod docking system sensors needed adjustment, and again that sent the pod into safety mode and the brakes were applied and it stopped again.
In the incident on Thursday, why did it take 2 hours to get those passengers down?
We're going to improve our procedures to make sure that that doesn't happen again and that we can get the pod down to the ground and the passengers off in a much shorter period of time.
There is a fear that the public's perception of this attraction isn't so good now. They've seen these incidents and will be worried. What if I'm stuck up there for 2 hours? What if something worse happened?
We don't expect to see the repeat of those kind of incidents happening again. Our focus at the moment is to ensure that we're operating normally and that people's confidence is restored.
It looks a little like security and these emergency measures haven't properly been thought through. Would that be a fair assessment?
I think what we've got is a situation where we're always putting the safety and the comfort of our passengers as a priority. I obviously feel extremely sorry and a bit embarrassed about these problems. They shouldn't have occurred. I think it would be unrealistic to say that you're going to open something new and innovative and, despite the huge amount of testing that's taken place, not expect to have some teething problems.
Andy Dickinson, ITV News, Brighton.
A cat has been shot and killed with an air gun in Dorset. Indy, a 5-year-old Bengal, was hit with a pellet at Corfe Castle. He died 4 days later. The RSPCA says it wasn't the first time he'd been shot and are calling for tighter weapon controls.
£50 million plans to expand Southampton docks have been unveiled. The owners, ABP, want to increase capacity at the port by 15,000 vehicles to 55,000. More than 900,000 vehicles were shipped through the port last year. 520,000 were for export.
A lorry became stuck under a railway bridge in Romsey earlier. It happened on Great Bridge Road at around 11 a.m. The road was closed while the lorry was moved and speed restrictions were imposed on trains.
You're watching ITV News here in the Meridian region, and we're jolly pleased you are. Thank you very much indeed. Coming up, Cool Simon with a hot weather forecast. Plus,
turning sour, problems for dairy farmers as it's revealed youngsters no longer want to drink a pint of milk a day.
for more on all of our stories, do head to itv.com/Meridian. Any views or news, call us please, 0808 1010 095, the number to ring. Or you can get in touch via Facebook, or why not send us a tweet at ITV Meridian.
Now, sadly, it's a sign of the times, a growing shortage of people who care for vulnerable adults in their own homes. It's leading to fears that people could end up in hospitals and care homes when they don't need to be there.
Well, that's led to calls for better funding of home care to ease the financial strain on the NHS and on the families of people who simply need looking after. Katie Oscroft reports.
It's the little things that make being at home such a pleasure for James Porteous. He's been in a wheelchair since he was a child because he had polio, but it's never prevented him from leading the life he wanted. It was only when his wife needed a hip replacement that he had to ask for help.
All the joys of life are about living here and having our family around us and so on. And the one snag we had was that I couldn't actually manage to look after myself.
I need to get onto the bed.
James has carers who help to get him in and out of bed and the bath. They're provided by a company which says it needs 50 more staff to meet the demands from people like James. And it's not alone.
When we have these shortages, the people that need this care, like James, are left in hospitals, left in respite care. There's other people waiting for treatment that they can't get because hospital beds have been taken up. There are people that really, first of all, want to come home, and second of all, shouldn't be there in the first place.
We need more encouragement to bring people into care, more sort of reasons to join, other than the fulfilment and the love of the job. The original carers are there, need a little, wages would be nicer, that just give us a little bit.
A Department of Health spokesman said that it is essential that older and vulnerable people get the high-quality care they deserve, and added that's why we've given local authorities access to up to £3.5 billion to spend on social care.
Adult social care and the children's social care, the services are being cut and being squeezed really. And I think if we keep cutting those services, it's going to increase hospital admissions and long-term care.
It's so abhorrent to me that I would lose the opportunity of independence and living in my own home.
The people who help to look after James Porteous say they are finding it hard to cope with the number of people who need care and a shortfall of staff. Katie Oscroft, ITV News.
Prime Minister Theresa May opened today's PMQs by paying tribute to David Cameron. The former PM stepped down from his role as the MP for Witney on Monday after 15 years of service.
He has been a tremendous public servant, both for his Witney constituency, but also for the country as a whole. And under his leadership, we saw the economy being stabilised, we saw more people in work than ever before, we saw people on low incomes being taken out of paying tax altogether. And this government will build on that legacy.
More than £113 million is to be invested in groundbreaking medical research in Oxford. The money awarded to the Oxford Biomedical Research Centre will help support research into cancer, diabetes and stroke, among other conditions.
A homelessness campaigner in Oxford is to receive the honorary Freedom of the City in recognition of her work. A special ceremony is being held tonight to honour Leslie Dewhurst, who led Oxford Homeless Pathways for 13 years and opposed cuts to homeless services.
Well, now, the idea of a glass of milk at school is something that many of us of a certain age are probably familiar with, but there are concerns that today's youngsters are shunning milk and dairy products.
Well, a recent survey for Dairy UK found that on average people over 65 drink milk 875 times a year, but it's only consumed by those under 20 Sorry, I've completely confused you now. Let me start that again. So if you're under 25, you're likely to consume milk only 275 times a year. I'm glad I got that out. Here's Hannah Thomas.
The milk industry is on the turn. For decades, we've brought up our children to believe that it'll make their bones big and strong. But dairy farmers like Rieslacher are now digesting the details that our kids are going off it. And he thinks they may prefer fizzy drinks instead.
There seems to be bad news coming all the time, so I think it's just really important that as farmers we do a better job of getting the good message out there of how good milk is. The sugary soft drinks industry, they're very, very big businesses. You know, as small family farms, we're up against it in terms of our competitors, so I think it's just really important that we shout loud and be very proud of the top quality, nutritious, wholesome food that we are producing.
Well, the farm's been in Reese's family for nearly a century. And unlike many dairy farmers, they've managed to make the business a success. But what if milk was to fall completely out of fashion in the future? In the past, we've grown up with milk on TV.
Milk? Ugh, it's one of them lush drinks.
But perhaps we don't tend to see it advertised as much now. So could it really disappear from our screens and vanish from our fridges?
I dread to believe, think what would happen if milk went out of diets. It's got to be there. Young people like to see an image, and in some ways we've got to market milk as something cool, nice to drink, good taste, good value, healthy.
But this is what vegans class as healthy. They say youngsters are eating vegetarian food because it's good for the environment.
They're the ones who are really starting to become more conscious of everything that's going on in today's society, and they're waking up, shall we say, to what needs to be done in order to actually save the planet.
And what about the idea that milk products are high in fat?
If you don't have a health condition that means you shouldn't be eating dairy, then it is fine to eat as a balanced part of your diet. I think in the past we have relied on it far too much for, say, calcium.
Well, farmers say it's a fundamental source of food and full of flavour. Hannah Thomas, ITV News.
It's 18 minutes past 6, time to cross to London to find out what's making the headlines on the ITV National News. Here's Mark Austin.
Tonight, the growing number of doctors denying treatments on the NHS to balance the books. Figures obtained by ITV News reveal GPs are refusing procedures such as hearing aids, hip replacements and mental health services. Pauline Kafaki, who survived Ebola, is cleared over claims she potentially put the public at risk. And it's lucky 13 for Sarah Story as Paralympics GBs surpass their performance in London. Join Mary and me at 6:30.
Thank you, Mark. Now, what do you suppose links a famous military hospital in the south and one of Britain's most notorious families?
Well, genealogist and author Paul McNeill has been researching the history of Netley Hospital near Southampton, where for 100 years sick and injured troops were cared for.
All that's left, the chapel in the Royal Victoria Country Park, is being restored with nearly £3 million of lottery funds. And Paul's been telling Fred about some of the more famous and infamous patients.
From the 1850s right through to the 1940s, ships would come into a mooring that they'd built out here, a big pier, and the orderlies would row the soldiers in on rowing boats, tens of thousands. But as the numbers went up and the casualties got higher, they couldn't bring big enough ships in close enough. So instead of that, they would ship them up to Southampton at the top of the water, and they built a railway from Southampton directly into Netley Hospital.
Extraordinary.
Hampshire County Council were renovating the place and were interested in people that had stories about it.
And talking of people with stories, you've discovered a couple of very interesting characters by the name of Cray.
Most of the Cray family had been in the army at one time or another, and I found two particular Cray relatives that had been through Netley Hospital. John was a riveter, had enough at that at the age of 18, very hard work, joined the army, wasn't the best soldier, spent probably almost half his time in hospitals for one minor ailment or another, what old lags would call a malingerer,
And when he came back to the UK, he managed to get himself put into net leave for the best part of 2 weeks. Basically, at the end of it, he was reported as not having anything wrong with him at all.
And the other Cray?
The other Cray was a very different story. This was Clement Cray. He was shipped out to Belgium. He actually took a bullet wound to the head. So he was shipped back by steamer to Southampton and spent nearly a month in the hospital being cared for. They operated on him, and after the operation, within 8 hours, he was dead through meningitis.
Extraordinary. And if we could talk about more recent Crays, Reggie and Ronnie, I didn't realise this, but you've discovered, in fact, that they actually had a house in Hamble and their favourite local watering hole was the Bugle Hotel.
Absolutely, they owned a cottage effectively, and the stories go that they would walk down to the Bugle pub and be lords of the manor. There was never any trouble, as the apocryphal stories go. While they were there, everything was very peaceful anyway.
As good as gold.
Yeah, exactly.
Two lovely lads.
Yeah.
Why do you suppose the Crays would have wanted to come to this part of the world?
It's a good question. There were obviously family ties through stories they probably heard about the various wars, and it's a nice place compared to the East End of London. But also there were some connections with Southampton. There are stories about a mafia boss being brought in on a steamer into Southampton. There are also stories about the Mad Axeman.
Frank Mitchell, who they actually released from Dartmoor prison, who then disappeared mysteriously.
Absolutely, and there's an apocryphal story about a motorboat that was abandoned when the Crays went away to prison in Southampton, and the rumour is that Frank Mitchell was lost somewhere at sea. So it does make you wonder if he's floating about in the Solent somewhere.
Dearie me. Well, Paul, Hampshire County Council spending the best part of £3 million restoring the Royal Victoria Hospital back to something like its former glory, and that's got to be a good thing, hasn't it?
Absolutely. So many people have got history tied up with this place. So many soldiers went through its gates that it's something for everyone in the UK and America, all over.
Well, Paul, good luck with the book, but remember, the Crays know where you live.
I'll be careful.
I was only joking. Sports news now. There's been more success for the South athletes in the Paralympics in Rio. Georgina Hermitage won her second gold medal, setting a new world record in the 400 metres. It follows her 100-metre victory earlier this week. And the women's basketball team have booked their place in the semi-finals, with Joy Hazelden from Southampton playing her part in the success. Well done.
Football, Brighton beat top of the table Huddersfield last night, but their victory did have more than a slice of luck. Anthony Knockhart scoring the goal with the ball squirming under the goalkeeper. It lifts the Seagulls into 7th place.
Meanwhile, Reading extended their unbeaten run to 4 games with a goalless draw at home to Birmingham City. Yap Stam's men now in 10th place.
Now, have you ever wished you could fly like a bird?
Yes.
Well, one woman is doing exactly that. You can learn a few things.
Sasha Dench is flying with swans on their annual migration from the high Arctic, 4,500 miles back to England. Ken Goodwin caught up with her as she set off for her epic expedition.
When Buick Swans take off, it's a powerful run-up, followed by majestic wing beats as they soar into the air. When Sasha Dench takes off, with what appears to be a lawnmower engine and a fan strapped to her back, it's not quite the same effect. But if you want to follow Buicks as they migrate across the Arctic tundra, then this is probably the best way to do it. Sasha from Slimbridge Wildfowl and Wetlands Trust has just been out to Sweden to do some cold weather flying, acclimatising herself to the sub-zero temperatures she'll encounter on the flight of the Swans.
Quite often you're trying to take off in what was frozen but is now a kind of a big slushy mess. So you're running through a slush just trying to take off, and so it's hard to get the right sort of speed. So there's some techniques to modify there. Also the extreme exposure from the wind on your face. I hadn't thought that was such a big thing either, but the strong wind on face and eyes can really tire you out and get you cold. Heated clothing is going to be an essential. I tried with all kinds of ways of heating up. If you're doing long flights, you spend the next 3 hours sitting reasonably static, particularly if I'm trying to cover lots of country. And in that time, your body will definitely cool down. So yeah, heated clothing is going to be necessary.
Today is the official launch of Sasha's epic project, which will see her follow the Buick migration route from Russia, 4,500 miles all the way to Slimbridge, where a couple of hundred of the swans spend their winters.
Flight of the Swans was all about trying to find out once and for all what is going wrong for the Buick Swan, why the numbers continue to decline. We've lost about half of them in the last 20 years, and we can't afford to let it keep on going.
Sasha has more training to do, and there are a few technical hitches to be ironed out. But as winter starts to close in and the Buick Swans take to the air and head for milder weather, Sasha will be following them.
I am really looking forward. After 2 years of planning, I'm definitely getting ready to just go out and do it.
Ken Goodwin, ITV News, Slimbridge.
Fantastic.
Our own high flyer now, it's Simon. Simon, no Arctic conditions coming our way.
No, still far too warm for that, but we still don't mention the H word. But the warm weather has, of course, been affecting things in the gardens. We're still getting the big sunflowers coming in, including the ones modelled by small children. That's Lucy and Holly, 9 and 3 from Hedge End. Planted it themselves now. 11 foot 2 inches tall. Gosh. They're very proud of it, as they would be. It's looking past its best, though, I think. But have a look at this one from Mrs. Chadder in Reading. It's a 9-footer, and on the inside, it looks like it's inside out. But that's basically 6 or 7 baby sunflowers have grown in the middle of the big sunflower. Isn't that unbelievable? And who knew sunflowers did a daily commute too? I hope they've got seats, or they'll be standing up all the way when the train finally arrives. Speaking of commutes, and look what Debbie spotted growing in one of those little traffic islands at the road junction.
That's a pumpkin.
That is a pumpkin,
Is it growing there?
Or was it thrown there? Yes. We'll never know. But soon be Halloween, although it appears to be still spring, as Don on the Isle of Wight has seen the second coming of his crocuses, or croci, and Carol Evans in Brackley's clematis has also unexpectedly flowered again. So Meridian weather at itv.com if you spot any other odd things on roundabouts.
And hot.
Still. Oh, but wet too.
Wet too.
Good band.
Let's find out more. Simon Parkin.
From blizzards to pool, driving through Europe. Eurotunnel the Shuttle sponsors ITV Meridian weather.
Just a quick one for you, sunrise or sunset, what do you reckon? Actually sunset last night over the Isle of Wight, and as they say, red sky at night, shepherd's delight, red sky in the morning, shepherd's warning, might be a red sky tomorrow morning, because tonight it's dry, it's clear, it's misty again in places, and it's mild and muggy. Tricky for sleeping, 16, 17 the overnight low. Now come tomorrow morning, any mist will burn away fairly quickly. Lots of blue sky to get us going, but as the day goes on, we are going to see some cloud increase, and then come the afternoon, a Met Office weather warning kicks in for some heavy and thundery showers. Now, it's likely many of us will stay dry, but if one of those showers lands on you, could be an awful lot of rain falling in a very short space of time. But again, a warm day in the sunshine, highs of 26, 27 degrees. Your high tide times you can see in Portsmouth, 10 to 11 in the morning, 25 past 11 in the evening, and then another Met Office weather warning to take us Thursday night into Friday. More heavy rain possible, but once that rain's cleared through, fresher air coming our way.
Eurotunnel the Shuttle sponsors ITV Meridian weather.
Well, before we go, a look ahead to tomorrow's programme, and it's 100 years ago the first ever tanks went into action on the battlefields of the Somme.
Yes, the centenary will be marked with special events in London and at the Tank Museum in Dorset. We'll bring you the first of 2 special features telling the story of some of the soldiers who took part in that first tank battle in France. We'll speak to the daughter of the officer who led the attack and hear of the bravery and sacrifice of young men who were effectively guinea pigs in a battlefield experiment.
These young guys who were doing this for the very first time, they knew there was an enormous weight of expectation on their shoulders, and they go on to create a force that is absolutely essential for us to win that war.
Please join us for that tomorrow. In just a moment, we've got the ITV Evening News tonight with Mark Austin and Mary Nightingale.
Sangeeta's got our late news, haven't you?
Yes, I'll try and talk by then.
And well worth stopping up for. But for now, from the team here at ITV Meridian, thanks for watching. Take care.
See you later. Bye-bye.